Okay, number 12 says find the domain of f of x equals 3x minus 2, and the range is -8, -5, 1, and 4. So the domain would be the x values. That is what we're trying to find. F of x, remember, is just a fancy way to write a y, and then the range would be the y values. So they're telling us these are the y values. If we replace our y with each one of these numbers, I should be able to solve for the x. So that means my first equation would be -8 equals 3x minus 2. Then my next one would be -5 equals 3x minus 2. Then I'd have a positive 1 equals 3x minus 2. And then I'd have 4 equals 3x minus 2. Now I could put all of those individually into insolve and solve them. I could solve them by hand, or we could do this on the calculator. So let me pull the calculator up and see another way that we could do this. Okay, so on the calculator, I'm going to go to B for graph. And I know we haven't done this before, but remember the f of x is just my y, right? So if I typed in my equation, which is just 3x minus 2, and I hit enter, I can see that it's graphed. And I'm not really concerned about the graphing. What I want is the table. So from this point, if I do Control T, it will give me a table. So remember, my y values, the first one was -8. So here's my x column, but here's my y column. So if I scroll up, here's -8 for my y, so that means this would be my x value. So I'm going to write that right up here. I'm going to say, so my domain is going to be for the -8, I'm going to have -2. My next range value was -5, so if I arrow down right here, sorry, if I arrow down, right here's -5, oh sorry, there's -5, so that means I have -1 would be my domain. My next range was a positive 1, and again, if I go down, I can see right here is 1, so my domain would also be a positive 1. And my last range value they have listed as 4, so here's 4, so my domain value would be a positive 2. So I didn't have to do much, just type in the equation, hit graph, and then Control T to see the table. All right, number 13 says, George works as an appliance salesman. He makes $2,500 per month and 5% of his sales. He needs to make at least $20,000 over the next 4 months to be able to pay his bills and have enough to buy Christmas gifts. What is the minimum number of sales he would have to get over the next 4 months to reach his goal? Okay, so let's remember, first of all, he makes this much per month, right? And how many months are we looking at? And that would be 4 months. So that means he will make the $2,500 times 4, because that's a given, right? But plus he will also make 5% of his sales. So we're going to write 5% as a decimal, and remember 5% is going to be 0.05. So I'm going to say 0.05 times the amount he sells. So can we let the letter S represent his sales? So I'm going to multiply the 5% times his sales. And I need that to equal, it says to make at least. Okay, so that means this amount needs to be at least $20,000 or more. So I'm going to say greater than or equal to the $20,000. And so it says, what is the minimum number of sales he would have to get over the next 4 months to reach his goal? So that would be my inequality problem. So now all I have to do is solve for the variable S. So if I do this, let's see, I've got 2,500 times 4. Well, that's $10,000 right there. 0.05 S greater than or equal to 20,000. So if I'm trying to solve for the S, that means I will move my $10,000 over to the other side by subtracting. And I've run out of space. That's okay. 0.05 S greater than or equal to 20,000 minus 10,000 is just 10,000. and then I'm going to divide by my 0.05 so that my s is by itself. So the 0.05s cancel, it leaves my s. 10,000 divided by 0.05 is going to be 200,000, and that is dollars. And the question is, do I leave my inequality sign or do I flip it? I'm going to leave it because I did not multiply or divide by a negative number. So the amount of cells that he needs would be $200,000 or more. Okay, number 14 and 15, we are just solving the equation. You can see number 14, I have just the variables y in this and no other, and I have an equal sign, so that means I can put this in solve. Number 15 also, I just have x's in an equal sign, so I can put this in solve. So I'm just going to pop up my calculator, and let's go to home page, and then go to Scratchpad, and from there we can do the two equations. So I'm going to do it, both of them right now. So I'm going to go to menu, 3, and then 1 for in solve, and I'm going to type in my first equation, 8y minus a parentheses 2y minus 3, close my parentheses, equals 9. Don't forget, when it's an in-solve, I have to say comma y, whatever my variable is, and hit enter. So my answer for number 14 would be y equals 1. So let's do it again. This time I'm going to do number 15. So I have menu 3, 1 again. And this time my problem is 3 parentheses 5x minus 2 minus 6x equals 3 parentheses 3x plus 2. Again, comma, and my variable, which is x. Enter, and it says no solution found. So what does that mean if I have no solution found? That means no matter what we try to put into our x, nothing is going to work. And if we had done this by hand, what would have ended up happening is this. I'll just write it right here. If we combined all of our like terms here and all of our like terms here, I would have ended up with 9x minus 6 equals 9x plus 6. And then if I attempted to move my x's to one side, I would subtract 9x from the right and do the same thing over here on the left. And then what happens is my x's cancel themselves out, and I'm left with two different numbers. This is not true, so that means we have no solution, just in case you did it by hand. Okay, 16 says, Sachi found a used bookstore that sells pre-owned DVDs and CDs. DVDs X cost $9 each, and CDs Y cost $7 each. Sachi can spend no more than $63. Which graph best represents the situation? Okay, so if I were to try to write an equation, or sorry, a inequality to match the situation, the DVDs are going to be represented by X, and they cost $9 each. So I'm going to say 9 times the number of DVDs. Plus, the CDs are going to be the Y, and they cost $7 each. So 7 times my Y. And she can spend no more than $63. So this amount right here can't be any more than 63. That means it has to be less than or equal to $63. Now guys, look at my answer choices. I don't even have to solve my inequality problem. All I have to do is think about some things to look for on here. So my first thing is that I realize it's this inequality sign, less than or equal to. So if it is less than or equal to, would I be, first of all, let's do the equal to. Would I have a solid line or a dashed line? So remember, if it is less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, it should have a solid line. If it's just less than or just greater than, it has a dashed line. So because it has the equal to, we need a solid line. So a little hard to see, but A has a dashed line, so that's not it. C has a dashed line, that's not it. So it's either B or D. And then because it's a less than sign, that means we're going to shade below. So which one of these lines have I shaded below? So obviously it's going to be B, my answer. Okay, number 17 is asking us which equation below represents the graph. So if my equations were in slope-intercept form, it would be a little easier to see which equation matches. So I rewrote all of these. So I subtracted 4x from both sides, but then divided by a -1. So I ended up with a positive 4x and then a positive 3. This one, again, I subtracted 4x, but then divided by -1, so I have a positive. Divided 3 by -1, so I have a -3. The next one, I subtracted my 4x, but I'm not dividing by anything, so I end up with a -4x, and then -3. And on the last one, again, I subtracted my 4x, and this I have a positive 3. So now look at our graph. First of all, on the y-axis, it is crossing my y-axis at -3. So my y-intercept would be -3. So that means it would either be this one or this one. So it's not D, it's not A. And then I notice that the slope itself is negative. You see it's going down in this direction, right? So it is a negative slope. So all I have to do is look at my slope values. This is a positive, so that one's not it. This is a negative, so C would be the correct answer. Okay, 18 says draw the graph for each of the following slopes. A positive slope, negative slope, a slope of 0, and undefined. So I'm going to draw a couple little graphs showing my x and my y axis. So let me get these on here first, and then we can talk about the slopes. Okay, so now let's look. If it's a positive slope, remember we read from the left to the right, and so that means positive, I should be going up. So I could have an equation that looks like that. If it's negative, again, from left to right, that means we're going down. So I'm going to draw something like that. If it is a slope of 0, remember it is a horizontal line. So that'd be a slope of 0. And if it's undefined, that means it is a vertical line. Okay, let's go to number 19 and 20 while we're here. Number 19 said parallel lines have the blank. Well, parallel lines have the same slope. While perpendicular lines, the slopes are opposite reciprocals. Okay? Okay, 21 said, what is the slope of each of the following? A line that is parallel to the x-axis. So again, let me draw a couple of graphs so we have a visual. This is my x, this is my y. So if I want a line that is parallel to the x, so here's my x. Parallel means it's going to look like this. So what kind of slope was that just a minute ago? We talked about it. And it's going to be a slope of 0. How about a perpendicular to the x-axis? So if this is the x-axis and I want to draw perpendicular, it's going to look like this. How about if I do a different color? Let me do that over. It's going to look like this. So it's a vertical line. Remember, a vertical line has an undefined slope. So this will be undefined. So if I do it again over here, let me draw my x and y axis. And the first one says I want parallel to the y-axis. Well, here's my y-axis. So if I draw it parallel, it's going to look like this. Vertical means it's going to be undefined. And then if it's perpendicular to the y, here's my y-axis perpendicular to that, would look like this. So it's a horizontal line, which means it's a slope of 0.